My dad's illegitimate daughter pretended to be me to date an heir from one of New York's most powerful families. Then the real heir came back from overseas, put his arm around me at a gala, looked at my horrified half-sister, and raised an eyebrow. "I hear you're my girlfriend. Did you bother to let me know?" After I went to study abroad, my dad's illegitimate daughter, Jenny, suddenly started living very large. She went on luxury shopping sprees, attended all sorts of high society galas, and spent her days posting photos with celebrities. Just yesterday, she posted on her social media feed. It was a set of couple photos. You couldn't see the man's face clearly, but you could see the massive brand logo on his shirt. Someone commented below, "Who's the lucky guy?" She replied playfully, "Someone from the Hall family, of course." The Hall family? The Hall family of New York only has one son. I glanced at the man standing by the floor-to-ceiling window. "Are you dating Jenny Shaw?" George Hall closed his copy of the Wall Street Journal, a smirk playing on his lips. "You know exactly who I want to date, don't you?" He walked toward me and gently toyed with my earlobe. "Or, would you like a more forceful reminder?" The man leaned in slightly, the collar of his silk shirt hanging loose. The faint marks on his collarbone were sharp and alluring. I pushed him back an inch with my finger. "Professor Hall, please don't try to seduce me before I graduate." He chuckled, but then his tone shifted, his eyes deepening. "Has that sister of yours been bothering you lately? Just thinking about Jenny makes my blood boil. A few years ago, my mother passed away. Not long after, my father brought his illegitimate daughter home. He said Jenny had been adrift in the world, suffering terribly, and it was time for her to be formally welcomed into the family. But Jenny was a real piece of work. She was an expert at playing the victim. She'd steal my jewelry, then act all heartbroken and wronged. Gina, I know you hate me, but you can't just accuse me like this. The jewelry, the company shares, the designer bags, they're all yours. I never dreamed of having any of it. Because I know, I'm just the shameful illegitimate daughter. I deserve to live a pathetic, miserable life." I said coldly, "My missing emerald ring is in your room. Are you still going to deny it?" She choked up, her voice trembling and pitiful. "When I was little, my mom made me a ring out of green glass. She told me that when Dad finally came for us, the ring would turn into a real one. When I saw the ring on the coffee table the other day, it just reminded me of my mom, and I couldn't help but try it on." She stared at my dad, a single tear rolling down her cheek. "Dad, I was just missing my mom. I'm not a thief." Huh, what an act. I was just about to say something. But my dad yelled, "Gina, that's enough." He wiped away Jenny's tears, his voice laced with guilt. "I've failed you and your mother all these years. Now that you're home, I'll take you out to buy some nice jewelry. Whatever Gina has, you'll have too." I said coolly, "Wow, Mr. Shaw, how generous. Using marital assets to spoil your illegitimate daughter. Aren't you afraid my mom is going to claw her way out of her coffin and slap you?" My dad shot me a furious glare. Jenny started sobbing again. "Dad, don't, I know I can't compare to my sister. I don't want anything." My dad soothed her, "Don't cry, don't cry. Don't listen to Gina. Dad will give you anything you want." Jenny looked up at him and asked meekly, "Dad, I don't want luxury goods or jewelry, I just want to go to the same school as my sister, so I can find a job and support myself. Is that okay?" My face darkened. I had earned my spot at Columbia. Jenny's college entrance scores weren't even good enough to get into a state school, and now she wanted to use the back door? But my dad was deeply moved. "Jenny, your mother raised you so well. You're so independent and down to earth. Okay, leave it to me." The year Jenny started at Columbia, I dropped out. I had been accepted into a top-tier grad program abroad. I was sick of Jenny's crocodile tears and had no desire to waste my time fighting with her. My mother always taught me that in life, as in business, you have to focus on the big picture. Your energy is finite. If you get bogged down in petty squabbles, you'll never amount to anything. Unfortunately, Jenny and her homewrecker mother would never understand that. Jenny would send me photos every few days. Sometimes, she'd be wearing a new piece from my favorite brand. Other times, she'd be wearing a jewelry set identical to one of mine. She even sent me a text, "Gina, Dad says we have similar taste. I guess that's why we're sisters." I lazily typed back, "Enjoy being my copycat. You can have all my bad luck, too." She went quiet for a while after that. Then one day, George was helping me with a business plan. A notification from Jenny popped up on my phone. She had taken a bunch of photos at my favorite equestrian club, trying to look dashing and skilled. Her riding gear and helmet were the exact same style as mine. But her grip on the reins was all wrong. She was clearly just posing for pictures. I couldn't be bothered to reply and was about to mute her notifications. Then I noticed the horse she was on was my white competition stallion. She wrote, "Gina, your horse Ghost is so sweet." I accidentally pinched him, but he didn't even get mad. LOL. My face was expressionless as I tossed my phone aside. I looked at the man frowning over his work. "Mr. Hall, since when does your equestrian club allow beginners?" George glanced down at my chat history. Then he capped his pen and made a call. "The club upstate, are you managing it now? You're letting just anyone in. Are you trying to ruin my reputation?" His voice was low and unhurried, but it carried an undeniable authority. On the other end of the line, the manager stammered out assurances that he would screen guests more carefully and strictly enforce membership rules. George twirled his pen, his expression cold. "Find out who lets someone ride Miss Shaw's horse, Ghost, without permission. Ban them for life. And fire any staff member who bent the rules for them." The call ended. He looked down at me with a half smile. "Still angry?" I feigned indifference. "I'm not angry at all." He smiled indulgently. "Right. You're not angry. I am." Not long after, I received an invitation from Columbia for an academic conference. It was a semi-academic, semi-commercial event, with a guest list of big names from both academia and the business world. Walking onto the Columbia campus, I couldn't help but feel a wave of nostalgia. A year ago, this was my school. Now, I was just a visitor. My best friend, Maya, heard I was back and insisted we get dinner. Over the meal, she animatedly dished out the latest gossip. "The new freshmen are something else, but there's this one girl who takes the cake." Soon after school started, she was in her dorm bragging about all her luxury stuff. And guess what? Nobody cared. So she got mad and asked her roommates if they were looking down on her. Her 3 roommates are all state valedictorians. They're either in the library or the study hall 24/7. They genuinely didn't have time for her drama. So she kept trying to get attention, even going to her advisor and crying about how her roommates were excluding her. I frowned. "That's ridiculous." Maya laughed. "Oh, it gets better. I have no idea how this girl even got into Columbia. She failed linear algebra. They gave her a chance to retake it, and she actually tried to get her roommate to take the final for her." I had to laugh. "And then what?" Maya rolled her eyes. "Her roommate obviously refused and reported her." I said, "So she must have gotten in serious trouble for that, right?" Maya sneered. "That's the crazy part. The girl's family is rich and powerful. Not only did she not get disciplined, but the advisor actually went to her roommates and told them to work on dorm unity." I was indignant. "Who is she? How can she get away with throwing her weight around like that?" Maya lowered her voice conspiratorially. "She's the daughter of the Shaw family. Mr. Collins is her grandfather." I was stunned. That's my identity. But I had no idea I was such a menace. After the conference panels ended, there was a reception dinner. Maya and I had been in sessions all day and were starving. We immediately grabbed trays and headed for the food. I heard someone scoff behind us. These people from other schools have clearly never seen a real buffet. Acting like this cheap food is something to fight over. The voice sounded vaguely familiar. But when I turned around to say something, the person had already disappeared into the crowd. Maya grumbled, "What is wrong with people? Acting so high and mighty. Isn't it normal to eat when you're hungry? Since when is food high or low class?" I calmed her down, and we found a great spot to sit and eat. It was the perfect location, hidden behind a large potted plant. No one could see us, but we could see everything. A moment later, a few middle-aged men walked in through the entrance. They were fawning over a young woman in the center of their group, showering her with compliments. Maya said with disdain, "See those guys? They're from the MBA program. They don't study, they just network. Now they've latched onto someone new. It's never a good sign." I said, concerned, "Should we go help that girl? It looks like she's having trouble getting away." Maya laughed. "Oh, she's loving every second of it. Here, take a look. That, my friend, is the esteemed Miss Jenny Shaw, who loves nothing more than to social climb." My eyes widened. Jenny? Looking closer, the girl was decked out in luxury brands, with logos so big they were practically blinding. And beneath the thick layer of makeup, I could vaguely make out a few familiar features. Hey, it really was Jenny. Suddenly, it all clicked. Who else at this school could impersonate me without the Shaw family exposing them? While I was still thinking, Maya continued. "It's strange, though. Mr. Shaw was kidnapped when he was younger, and ever since then, he's been super protective of his family's privacy. So why is Jenny so high profile?" I said calmly, "A tiger is silent before it strikes, only a wild dog barks to show its fangs. The weaker someone is, the more they have to bluff." Maya laughed. Just then, her phone rang, and she stepped outside to take the call. I kept eating while watching Jenny's performance with the middle-aged men. "Miss Shaw, you're as talented as you are beautiful. Not only are you gorgeous, but you're winning academic awards. Like father, like daughter." I almost laughed out loud. Jenny winning awards? She was the dunce who had to retake linear algebra. Who knows how she got those awards? But Jenny looked incredibly smug. She elegantly cut a piece of steak and said, "Oh, the competition was easy. I just wrote something up, and I didn't expect the professor to pick it." One of the men continued to flatter her. "Your presentation today was so enlightening, Miss Shaw. Our company happens to have a project that would be a perfect fit for your family's business. Could you possibly put in a good word for us?" Jenny froze for a moment before saying, "Sure, I'll mention it to my dad's secretary, but I can't make any promises." The man quickly refilled her wine glass. "You're Mr. Shaw's only daughter. Everyone knows he dotes on you. If you ask, he'd pluck the stars from the sky for you." Jenny's face fell. She put down her glass. "Excuse me, I need to use the restroom." The middle-aged men exchanged confused glances, wondering what they'd said wrong. I just found it hilarious. Maya's phone call was taking forever. Feeling something was off, I got up to look for her. Just as I stepped out of the banquet hall, I heard someone shouting, "Can't you watch where you're going?" It was Jenny's voice. I quickly pushed through the crowd to see what was happening. She was pointing a finger right in Maya's face. My friend was holding a coffee cup, apologizing. "I'm so sorry. I'll pay to have the dress cleaned." Jenny pointed at the coffee stain on her skirt and sneered. "You'll have it cleaned? Do you have any idea how much this dress costs? You couldn't afford it if you sold yourself." Maya was starting to get annoyed. "I'll handle it however you want, but there's no need for personal attacks." A crowd was gathering, which only seemed to energize Jenny more. "However I want? This dress costs $18,000. I won't make you pay for all of it. Just pay for half, how about that?" Maya laughed in disbelief. "A stain that can be dry cleaned, and you want me to pay $9,000? Are you trying to rob me?" Jenny was full of arrogance. Just admit you're broke instead of making excuses. Do you even know what kind of dress this is? You think you can just dry clean it? You pauper. Maya's hands clenched into fists, too angry to speak. My best friend was a state valedictorian. When reporters went to interview her, they found her working in a factory to help her sick mother. That year, all the headlines called her the factory girl who conquered the college entrance exams. Her family was poor, yes, but she had more dignity and integrity than anyone I knew. Calling her a pauper? Jenny Shaw, you are asking for it. I pushed through the crowd and stood in front of Maya. Well, if it isn't Miss Jenny Shaw. The moment she saw me, Jenny looked like she'd seen a ghost. What are you doing here? I sneered. If I weren't here, how would I get to see your two-faced act? People around us started whispering, and Maya asked me, you know her? I stared at Jenny and smiled. Of course. After all, she's... Jenny's eyes darted around, and she quickly cut me off. Fine, for your sake, I won't make her pay. She turned to leave. Trying to run? Not so fast. Hold on, I stopped her. We made a mistake, so of course we should make it right. Even if we have to pay the full price for this dress, that's fine with me. But, is it really worth $18,000? Just then, the group of middle-aged men who had been sucking up to Jenny arrived. They immediately jumped in. Who are you? What's this got to do with you? Miss Shaw is the heiress of the Shaw family. You think she can't afford this dress? I just smiled at Jenny and repeated, is this dress really worth $18,000? Jenny's face went pale. I already said you don't have to pay. What more do you want? I smiled. I want you to apologize for what you just said. Before Jenny could speak, the men exploded. Are you crazy? Miss Shaw, don't listen to her. Make them pay. Apologize for what? They're the ones who should be apologizing. I kept my eyes fixed on Jenny. You know I have a short temper. It's your call. I'll count to 3. 3, 2, 1. Before I could finish, Jenny whipped around, faced Maya, and bowed deeply. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have called you a pauper. Maya took a step back. Please, don't. A high and mighty lady like you apologizing to a peasant like me? I'm not worthy. The crowd burst into laughter, and the middle-aged men looked at each other, stunned. Jenny bit her lip, swallowed the insult, and quickly grabbed her bag and left. The men hurried after her. Miss Shaw, wait for us. The crowd slowly dispersed. Maya asked me, how did you scare her off like that? I just looked up the dress, and it really is $18,000. I smiled. That's a secret. I would never tell her. The only authentic version of that dress was in my closet back home. The one Jenny was wearing had to be a fake. That evening, I was getting ready to head home when George called. You've been back for a while. Miss me? Of course, I said. His voice was low and clear, full of temptation. And what exactly did you miss? I feigned despair. I was just thinking about that market research report you assigned me. I'm only a third of the way through. He clicked his tongue. Boring. You know that's not what I meant. I played dumb. Then what are you talking about? That's all that's on my mind. He chuckled. My flight lands after midnight. I'll come over and give you a private tutoring session. How does that sound? He'd turned the tables on me. But for some reason, my mood lifted. My good mood, however, didn't last long. Because the moment I got home, I saw Jenny sitting in the living room, crying. Across from her, with his back to the door, was my father. He was trying to comfort her. Your sister's always had a temper. Just try not to provoke her. Ha. At least you know who's really in charge. Hearing this, Jenny paused her crying for a second, then started wailing even more dramatically. I've been nothing but humble and subservient around her, but she still had to yell at me in front of all those people. Dad, I just don't know how to make her happy. My dad coughed, offering a weak platitude. All right. I'll talk to her when she gets back. Seeing this wasn't working, Jenny switched tactics, her eyes brimming with tears. Before my mom died, she held my hand and told me to be sweet when I got here, to treat Gina like my real sister. But she never taught me what to do if my sister never treats me like one. My dad's brow furrowed. Jenny pressed on, sobbing, Dad, I miss my mom so much. If she knew how unhappy I am, would she be sad? My dad's face hardened completely. Stop crying. When Gina gets back, I'll give her a piece of my mind. Jenny's eyes were red and swollen as she looked at him pitifully. Dad, please don't yell at Gina because of me, it's all my fault. I leaned against the doorframe and said lazily, Can your acting skills please be as limited as your intelligence? They both looked up. My dad's face lit up with surprise, and he opened his arms. Gina. You're back. Why didn't you tell me? I haven't seen you in over a year. You've gotten so thin. Jenny coughed loudly. That seemed to snap my dad back to reality. He cleared his throat. Gina, how can you talk to your sister like that? She's your sister, not your enemy. I sneered. I don't have a sister who bullies people. My dad looked puzzled. Bullies people? What are you talking about? I said, today, someone accidentally spilled something on her dress, and she demanded $18,000 from them. My dad had started from scratch and had been pushed around a lot in his early years. Hearing this, he frowned and looked at Jenny. Did you really do that? But Jenny said, Dad, I had a date with the son of the Hall family tonight. That person stained my dress and ruined my date. I was just angry, so I said it. My dad's attention was instantly diverted. The Hall family's son? You're dating him? Jenny lifted her chin proudly. Yes, Dad. She shot me a smug look. Jason said he's met a lot of rich kids, but he didn't like any of them. He only likes me. I scoffed but said nothing. My dad stroked his chin. If you really managed to get with the Hall family's son, that's quite a step up for you. But I heard he's been abroad all this time, and his life is extremely private. How did you two even meet? Jenny smiled shyly. We met at a party, it was love at first sight for him. I almost laughed. I sent George a text, Professor Hall, since when are you a party animal? George replied with a single question mark. I smiled silently and continued to watch Jenny's performance. I don't know what she read into my silence, but she looked at me with growing confidence. You're 3 years older than me, Gina. How come you're not dating anyone? Don't you want to? Or, is it that no one's interested? I gave a cold laugh. Why don't you worry about yourself? If I ever catch you pulling stunts under my name again, I won't be as nice as I was today. My dad looked at Jenny, confused. Her face turned pale, but she tried to hold her ground. Sister, I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, Jason likes me for me. It has nothing to do with whose daughter or granddaughter I am. After a pause, she added passive-aggressively, I wonder about you, though, sister. Are the men who chase you only after your money and status? How pathetic. You'll never find true love. Just as she finished, a car horn sounded from outside. Then I got a call from George. His voice was low and direct. I'm at your gate. I didn't spare Jenny another glance, grabbed my bag, and walked out. My dad called after me, where are you going? On a date, of course, I replied. Now my dad was really curious. Jenny followed me out too. The two of them stood by the garden, their eyes glued to the car. My dad let out a low whistle. I couldn't even get an order in for this Cullinan. Gina, who is this? A flash of jealousy crossed Jenny's face, and she blurted out, "Is my sister dating some old man?" My dad glared at her. "What are you talking about?" She realized her mistake and lowered her head, pretending to be meek, but her eyes kept darting toward the car. The window slowly rolled down, revealing a handsome, sharp-featured face. Jenny was captivated. George gave my dad a slight nod. "Good evening, sir." He completely ignored Jenny. My dad, trying to sound dignified, said, "Would you like to come in for some tea?" The man was polite but firm. "Thank you, but no. We're in a bit of a hurry tonight, so I won't impose. I'll be sure to pay a proper visit another day." My dad nodded. As the car was about to pull away, Jenny blurted out, "Hey, do you know my sister has a terrible temper? She bullies her classmates and friends." I stared at her in shock. My dad was shocked too. He whispered, "What nonsense are you spouting?" She held her head high, staring intently at George. "She even bullies me, her own sister. Her character is despicable. Are you sure you want to date someone like that?" My dad grabbed her arm, warning, "Jenny." George glanced at her, unconcerned. Then he took my hand and intertwined his fingers with mine. He looked at me, his eyes filled with devotion. "As long as she's willing to be my girlfriend, she can treat me however she wants." The car drove off. Thinking about the look on Jenny's face, like she'd just swallowed a turd, and my dad's string of rebukes, I couldn't help but laugh. "Professor Hall, you're an incredible liar. It seems I'm no match for you, in brains or in brawn." The man kept his hands on the steering wheel and said lightly, "You've never even tried." "How would you know?" I said, "You're a mixed martial arts champion." "Do I really need to try?" The car pulled into the garage. He hit the brakes and looked up at me. "It depends on the person." I was confused. "How so?" He spoke slowly, "Against an enemy, of course, I show no mercy. But for my girlfriend, I'd surrender without a fight." The lights from outside illuminated his profile, his features sharp and smooth. He leaned in, his face just an inch from mine. I could even smell the scent of cedarwood on him. It was clean and sharp, just like him. He chuckled softly in my ear. "So, what do you say? Want to give it a try? Make me surrender?" His voice was deep and magnetic, incredibly tempting. I was silent for a long moment, then turned my head to avoid his gaze and cleared my throat. "Professor Hall, let's wait until I graduate. I don't do relationships with my professors." He stared at me for a second, saying nothing. Click. He unbuckled my seatbelt. Then he opened the car door for me. He did everything a gentleman should, then strode off ahead of me. He was tall with broad shoulders, and his charcoal gray shirt gave him the air of a hitman. He practically had a storm in his stride. I ran to catch up, grabbing his sleeve and shaking it. "Don't be mad." The motion sensor lights flickered on and off, on and off. I held onto his arm, refusing to let go. After a long while, the tight line of his jaw finally softened, and his pace slowed. I looked up at him. He sighed and gently ruffled my hair. "I'm not mad, Gina. I just don't know what to do with you." George's grandfather donated several antiques to the museum, with a total value of over $100 million. The museum held a special gala in his honor. The old man had insisted that George be there. In his own words, "You've been abroad for so many years, it's time to start handing over my network to you. Now that you're back, this is a good, informal way to start meeting people." George had no choice but to accept the invitation. And he asked me to be his date. The banquet hall was filled with glamorous people. George's grandfather sat at the head table, with a constant stream of guests coming to greet him. I was admiring an antique vase at a display when I overheard some people gossiping nearby. "I heard Mr. Hall's grandson is back and will be here tonight." "Really? He's been so low profile for years. To show up now, does this mean he's being officially named the heir?" "That's what it looks like." I'm curious to see what he looks like. His parents were both stunning. I wonder if he inherited their good looks. I don't know what he looks like, but his girlfriend is quite the vixen. Girlfriend? Where? I found that odd. How many girlfriends did this George Hall have? Another woman in the group asked the question that was on my mind. Who is she? Where? The first woman pointed toward a Sung Dynasty calligraphy scroll. A woman in a cheapao stood with her back to us. See? The one in the cheapao. The term had a slightly derogatory tone. But you couldn't really blame her. The woman was wearing a sleeveless cheapao with cutouts, leaving her entire back exposed. Many guests were looking in her direction, whispering among themselves. She, however, was clearly enjoying the attention. She tightened her arms slightly, stood with her feet in a T stance, and tossed her hair back as she gazed up at the painting with a coquettish smile. Every movement was calculated to showcase her charm. But she didn't realize that the people looking at her, talking about her, were doing so with a mix of scrutiny and confusion. Who on earth was this woman? The invitation for this gala had explicitly stated a formal dress code. Everyone else was dressed elegantly and appropriately. Only this woman had ignored the dress code, wearing something revealing and out of place, clearly just to get attention. This was George's new girlfriend? His standards had really taken a nosedive. The guests around me seemed to agree. One said, "Is this really George Hall's taste?" Another sighed, "Well, he's young. They like to play around." The first one added, "Is she really his girlfriend? Why didn't he bring her with him?" The other replied, "I heard it myself at the entrance." She showed her invitation and made a point of saying she was the Hall family's future granddaughter-in-law. At this, the two exchanged a look, their expressions telling. I shook my head and sent George a text, "Since when did your grandfather get a granddaughter-in-law?" I looked up and saw him on the second-floor balcony, talking with his grandfather. After seeing his phone screen, he looked down and started typing. Even from a distance, I could see the playful smile on his lips. My phone buzzed with his reply. "If you don't come over here, where am I supposed to find one?" Another message quickly followed. "Help me out and play along in front of my grandpa, or he's going to start setting me up on blind dates." On the balcony, George's gaze found mine with pinpoint accuracy. He leaned over the railing and beckoned to me with a finger. The light from the chandelier glittered, outlining his figure. He was tall and imposing, his suit filled out in a way that was both powerful and enticing. He was truly hard to refuse. This was actually the second time I'd met George's grandfather. The first time was when I was a child, at my own grandfather's estate. The two old men were discussing fishing techniques and had me trying to identify different types of fish. In the end, they had me help them release all the fish they caught. Many years had passed. My grandfather was gone, but Mr. Hall was still as sharp and energetic as ever. I look a lot like my mother, who in turn looked like my grandfather. Before George could even make an introduction, Mr. Hall called out my name. "Is that you, Gina? It's been so many years. You've grown into such a beautiful young woman. Though, I understand your father. After what he went through, he'd naturally be worried about your safety. It's always better to be discreet." I nodded in agreement. Mr. Hall then seemed to notice George's arm around my waist for the first time. He raised his eyebrows dramatically. "Well now, you little rascal. You said you were going to introduce me to your girlfriend. Don't tell me it's Gina." George just smiled, his dark eyes full of amusement. Mr. Hall patted the back of my hand warmly. "Gina, with you here to keep this troublemaker in line, I can finally rest easy." I smiled shyly and said politely, "Oh, I could never manage him. It's better to let him grow wild." A flicker of confusion crossed the old man's eyes. I realized my mistake but didn't know how to fix it. George smoothly added, "What Gina means is that no matter how wild I grow, I'll never escape her grasp." That one sentence had his grandfather beaming. He took off his jade thumb ring and handed it to me. "Here, Gina. Take this. If he ever bullies you, you come find me, and I'll back you up. The jade ring was smooth and heavy, clearly a piece of exceptional quality. Moreover, it was something he wore personally, so it had to be priceless. But it was a gift from an elder, and I couldn't refuse. I looked to George for help. He took in my expression, leaned down, and whispered in my ear, "It's rare to see you looking so helpless." I pinched his palm hard, but he just caught my wrist. His fingers slid down my arm and intertwined with mine. George took the ring and said jokingly, "I haven't even made her your granddaughter-in-law yet, and she's already getting this kind of treatment. You've given away Grandma's ring. Now it's going to be hard for me to find a gift that compares." Mr. Hall's eyes darted between us, and he smiled. "All right, I'll do you a favor. Gina, my dear, I'll hold on to this for you for now and give it to you later, so this boy doesn't have a hard time. How about that?" I nodded eagerly. A smirk played on George's lips. "You'd better keep your word. If you back out when we get engaged, I'll have to go through your safe." How did we get to engagement? I looked up at him, and he met my gaze, completely unfazed. The hand resting on my waist was warm and firm. The skin beneath it felt like it was on fire. I could see more and more guests waiting outside the lounge to greet them. Using the excuse of needing the restroom, I quickly escaped the second floor. I followed the signs but heard familiar voices coming from the fire escape. "When are you going to take me to meet your grandfather?" That sounded like Jenny's voice. Soon, an unfamiliar male voice replied. "Jenny, this isn't the right occasion for personal matters. I'll take you home to meet him next time, okay?" Driven by curiosity, I peeked through the crack in the door. Inside the stairwell stood a man and a woman. The woman wore a sexy, backless cheapao, her face heavily made up. It was none other than Jenny. It dawned on me, the woman in the cheapao was her. And the man standing across from her, dressed in a black suit, looked panicked. His face was completely unfamiliar. He wasn't anyone from the Hall family. Jenny stood with her hands on her hips, all her previous elegance gone, her face flushed with anger. "What do you mean by that? You promised me today was the day I'd meet your family. Why are you backing out now?" The man's forehead was beaded with sweat. He said hastily, "There are too many people today, and my grandfather doesn't like to discuss family matters in public, so..." Jenny cut him off. "You're lying. It's because I told you I'm not Mr. Collins's granddaughter. That's why you're suddenly changing your mind, isn't it?" The man, Jason, rushed to embrace her. "No, that's not it, Jenny. I don't care if you're an illegitimate daughter, I still like you, Jenny suddenly lost control, her voice shrill. "You say it's not. Then why did you emphasize illegitimate daughter? Jason, are you looking down on me? Fine, I'll go see your grandfather myself and make him give me justice." She angrily started to storm out. Jason grabbed her, practically begging, "Jenny, please don't go. We can talk about this at home, okay? My grandfather is a very proud man." Jenny violently broke free and shoved open the fire escape door. We collided unexpectedly. When she saw me, her expression was filled with hatred. Well, Gina. You came here just to laugh at me, didn't you? Let me tell you, don't think all the good things in the world will just fall into your lap. I'm going to be the Hall family's granddaughter-in-law, and that's final." I said coolly, "And on what grounds?" She sneered. "On the grounds that Jason loves me, and that he's the only grandson of the Hall family." The fire escape door opened again, and the man named Jason stepped out. He pulled at Jenny. "Jenny, stop making a scene. Let's go home and talk." Jenny immediately linked her arm with his, lifted her chin, and declared, "Jason, you tell her. Tell her why I have every right to be standing here." I looked at him with a pleasant smile. "Jason, is it? The Hall family's grandson? Why don't you properly introduce yourself?" Jason's eyes darted away, and he flinched, not daring to meet my gaze. Jenny kept prodding him. Say something. Are you mute? Jason struggled for words and finally managed, "This is an important event. Don't cause a scene. It won't be good for anyone." Jenny's expression changed from anger to disappointment. "Fine. If you won't stand up for me, I'll fight for myself." With that, she shoved Jason aside and ran toward the banquet hall. I couldn't care less about Jenny and Jason's little drama. But if she caused a scene in the banquet hall, it would be a different story. Mr. Hall's donation of nearly $100 million worth of artifacts to the museum was a great public service. I couldn't let it turn into a joke because of Jenny's tantrum. I immediately ran after her. She was in stilettos, I was in flats, and I caught up to her quickly, pulling her outside. "Jenny, I'm warning you, don't do anything stupid. That Jason guy isn't a Hall. Stop acting crazy." Jenny brushed a strand of hair from her face and looked at me with contempt. "Gina, you think I don't know who Jason is? Get out of my way, or you'll be sorry." In front of me, Jenny was arrogant and defiant, nothing like the pitiful victim she played at home. I really should have recorded this to show my dad what his precious little daughter was really like. With a surprising burst of strength, Jenny pushed me aside and tried to get back into the hall. A few guests near the door, who had been chatting, turned to look at us. I bit my lip and signaled for security. But in the blink of an eye, Jenny was already heading up to the second floor. On the second floor, Mr. Hall was just coming out of the lounge and starting to wave at the cameras. I rushed up the stairs, grabbed Jenny's wrist, and lowered my voice. "Have you thought about the consequences? Are you trying to disgrace the entire Shaw family?" She shoved me hard, looking down at me. "I'm George Hall's girlfriend. This is practically my event. If anyone's going to be disgraced, it's you." Caught off guard, I lost my balance and started to fall backward. Someone leaped up the stairs, caught my waist, and pulled me into his arms. His arms were warm and strong, but his eyes were ice cold as he looked at Jenny. "I hear you've been telling people you're my girlfriend. Did you bother to inform me?" At that moment, security arrived. They all looked at the man beside me. "Mr. Hall." George's gaze swept over Jenny indifferently as he gave the order. "Please escort this young lady out." Jenny was completely stunned. She looked from George to me. "Mr. Hall? You, how could you be?" George ignored her, turning his attention to me. "Are you hurt?" Being ignored, Jenny suddenly lost control. She threw off the guard's hands and pointed at George, shouting, "You're an imposter." She started muttering to herself like a madwoman. "Jason is the Hall family's grandson. You must be an imposter. There's no way Gina could have gotten mixed up with the Hall family. It's impossible." The man finally spared her a glance, full of cold mockery. Then he waved his hand dismissively. The security guards got the signal, covered Jenny's mouth, and dragged her out. In a lounge outside the banquet hall, Jenny sat in a corner of the sofa, crying. My dad looked furious. He had rushed over after a meeting to attend the gala. He hadn't even had a chance to speak with Mr. Hall before George led him to the lounge. He was still reeling from the news that the young man who picked up Gina the other day and had the Cullinan I wanted was actually the Hall family's heir. Now, he was hit with the news of Jenny's heroic act of shoving me down the stairs and insisting the real Mr. Hall was an imposter. He picked up a cup, took a sip of tea, and then another. Only after he'd finished the whole cup did he feel he had the strength to speak. How could you do something like this? Have you lost your mind? Jenny looked at him, sobbing. Dad, you have to believe me. How could that person be Mr. Hall? The real Mr. Hall is dating me. That man is an imposter. Dad, don't be fooled. My dad's face was ashen with rage. Will you shut up? Mr. Hall has been with his grandfather all night. Everyone at this party knows who he is. You call him an imposter? What right do you have? Jenny stared at him, a tear rolling down her cheek. Dad, so you look down on me too? My dad waved his hand in frustration. Let's stick to the facts. And stop with the tears. Jenny wiped her eyes and said defiantly, Jason really is from the Hall family. He took me to one of their properties, and everyone there called him young Master Hall. He even had an invitation to tonight's gala, and everyone was so polite to him. Was all of that fake? A low voice came from the doorway. Yes, it was all fake. George had taken off his suit jacket, probably because it was too hot in the hall. His charcoal gray shirt looked crisp and expensive. He gave my dad a slight nod. Sir. My dad's expression immediately softened. He smiled. George, I didn't recognize you last time. My apologies for the oversight. Is there something you need? The man said simply. Security found another person acting suspiciously. I thought he might be an acquaintance of your younger daughter, so I had him brought here. He tilted his chin. The door opened again. The man being escorted in by 2 security guards was Jason Carr. The moment he saw Jenny, he began to struggle violently, clearly desperate to escape. But the guards were professionals, holding him firmly in place. Jenny rushed over, trying to push them away. Let go of him. Do you know who he is? Let go. Jason just pleaded softly, Jenny, please stop. Jenny seemed to understand something from his expression but couldn't believe it. She grabbed his hand, repeating over and over, You're the young master of the Hall family, right? You told me you were the sole heir. Say something. A derisive smile touched George's lips. My assistant will explain. Tell this young lady who is standing in front of her. The man in the suit next to him immediately spoke up. Miss Shaw, you seem to have been mistaken. This is the son of the property manager for several of the Hall family's suburban estates. His last name is indeed similar, but it's Carr. Carr. Jenny's face turned deathly pale. After a moment of silence, she went berserk, crying and hitting Jason. You lied to me. You're not the Hall family heir at all. You played with my feelings. You're despicable. The man took several slaps before finally yelling back. You lied to me too. You said you were the heiress of the Shaw Corporation and Mr. Collins's granddaughter. And what are you? Just an illegitimate daughter. Always daydreaming about climbing the social ladder. You should take a look at yourself and see if you're even worthy. Jenny was stunned into silence by his outburst. After a long moment, she gave a tragic laugh. So that's what you really think of me? Jason had clearly been holding back for a long time. He continued to rage, You call me a liar, but are you any better? If you weren't so ashamed of yourself, you wouldn't have used your sister's identity to show off. You're insecure and arrogant. You're not a princess, but you have a serious princess complex. I've had enough of it. Jenny stood there, pale and devastated. My dad, who had been feeling ashamed and furious, now felt a twinge of pity. He took Jenny's arm, trying to calm her down. Jenny, let's go home first. We'll talk at home. But Jenny suddenly exploded, pointing at him and screaming. If it weren't for you, would I be in this position today? I should have been born into a normal family, with a mom and a dad, not as some illegitimate child. You probably think you're so great, don't you? You say a few nice words and think that's fatherly love? My mom was the one who gave birth to me. She was the one who raised me. Where were you when we were suffering? You were off living on someone else's money. You say you'll treat us equally, but what really happens? All the good things go to Gina first. I only get her leftovers. Whenever there's a formal event, you always take her. If she's not available, you'd rather go alone than take me. What kind of father are you? I said coldly, and so? Shouldn't it be that way? Jenny turned to me, her eyes practically shooting fire. We're both daughters of this family. What gives you the right to be so high and mighty? What gives you the right to always stand on your moral high ground and judge me? Gina, you never once treated me like a sister, did you? You're just like your father, a total hypocrite. With that, she actually tried to slap me. But her wrist was caught and she was shoved onto the sofa. George took out a handkerchief, wiped his fingers, and said coolly, "Miss, if you resort to violence again, I won't hesitate to involve the police." Jenny laughed hysterically. "All of you, always taking her side, always favoring her, just because you think she has a better background and I have nothing. You're no different from all the other snobs." I said coldly, "I really want to slap some sense into you." Jenny was held down on the sofa by security, unable to move. I walked over, grabbed her chin, and looked her straight in the eye, telling her word by word. "Everything that has happened to you today, you brought upon yourself." The air conditioning in the lounge was on full blast. I took a sip of hot tea before continuing. "You talk about fairness? Why should a mistress's daughter expect fairness? Did your mother consider my family's happiness when she decided to become a homewrecker? You say I'm high and mighty? Why shouldn't I be? The fact that I haven't used every means at my disposal to crush you is the greatest mercy I could show. Ask yourself, how did I treat you when you first came here? I thought, you didn't choose your circumstances, so I shouldn't take my anger out on you. But how did you repay me? You played the victim, faked being pitiful, stole my things repeatedly and denied it, intercepted my mail, opened it, and then destroyed it. Jenny, you've stolen things worth over $1 million. Don't you feel any shame?" Jenny was breathing heavily. "I'm Dad's daughter too. I have his last name. Why do you get to have everything and I get nothing?" I said sharply, "Because you are a shameless, petty person." The lounge fell silent. I said coolly, "To this day, you still don't get it. I don't look down on you because of your birth, but because of your despicable character. I have many friends who come from poor families, and they are people of incredible integrity. Character is more important than wealth. Unfortunately, that's something you'll never understand. I've always been a bit lazy. I had said too much today and was tired." George personally refilled my cup with hot tea and handed it to me. I took a sip and didn't want to say anything more. My dad, however, looked at me, hesitating. "Gina." I put down the cup and gave him a cold look. He flinched and didn't dare continue. But I wasn't about to spare him either. I said coolly, "Today, Jenny tried to push me from the second floor. I will not live under the same roof as someone like that. Either I move out, or she does. You figure it out." After a pause, I added, "When I get home tonight, I'm calling the police. My missing watches, rings, and jade carvings, I'll let the police find them. Whoever needs to be sentenced will be sentenced, whoever needs to go to jail will go to jail. It won't matter who begs me." Jenny's head snapped up, her face drained of color. My dad's eyes widened. "Gina. That's your sister." "Mr. Shaw," George interrupted him, his voice level but firm, his eyes dark. "Don't break Gina's heart any further." The lounge door closed. It shut out all the despair and crying behind us. I could vaguely hear a final, muffled accusation from Jenny, directed at my father, "This is all your fault." I let out a weary smile. Yes, it was all his fault. He was greedy and lecherous. It was time he got a taste of what it felt like to be despised by both his daughters. A cold breeze washed over me. Standing in the hallway, my fingertips felt icy, and so did my heart. A weight settled on my shoulders. George had draped his suit jacket over me. After a moment, he called my name softly. "Gina." I said sullenly, "Don't try to comfort me." A smile flickered in his eyes. "You did great. You don't need comforting. I just wanted to ask you." From the banquet hall, the sound of an elegant melody drifted out. He took my hand and led me toward the hall. The doors opened, and all eyes turned to us. He, long accustomed to being the center of attention, simply bowed to me. "My beautiful lady, may I have the honor of this dance?" The lights swayed gently. The dance floor was empty. Everyone was waiting for the host of the evening to begin the first dance. I placed my hand in his. The music instantly became bright and cheerful. With a smile playing at the corners of his eyes, he wrapped an arm around my waist, and we began to dance. Gradually, more and more couples joined us on the floor. Laughter and joy filled the air, a welcome distraction from all the trouble. George ignored the dance etiquette. From beginning to end, he never changed partners. He held me tightly in his arms the entire time. As the music reached a crescendo, he lowered his head, his breath brushing against my ear. "Gina, what am I going to do? I think I'm falling in love." I didn't miss a step, the hem of my long dress gliding over his sharp trousers. Then I whispered back, "Then you'll just have to bear it." He chuckled softly in my ear and asked, "Is that so?" The lights dimmed as the music drew to a close. He held my waist, his presence slowly enveloping me as he whispered, "I quit my job. I'm coming back at the end of the year to take over the family business." I looked up in surprise, and he smiled as he kissed the corner of my lips. "So, Gina, would you be willing to reconsider me?" The song ended, and the lights came up, bright and full. All the shadows were illuminated, just as all the ice would eventually melt in the spring breeze. And the person who had held my hand on that snowy day was still here, his fingers intertwined with mine, never letting go. Until spring arrived, warm and in full bloom.